Hello and welcome to discourse number 4, the philosophical integration series. The topic of today's discourse is about dissolving the human form and transcending the human condition. Now, it's important to understand if we want to physically ascend or ascend in our awareness, we have to work with the matter of the human condition. If we reflect in our practice on the nature of the human condition, we'll find that sometimes it will appear very disadvantageous and unsatisfactory because it bears the hallmarks of decay, sickness, suffering, death, rebirth, and reincarnation. So, if you want to break the cycle of reincarnation, we have to develop in ourselves a deeper understanding of what the human condition or the human form actually is. Now, this is an advanced work for spiritual students to reflect upon, but it's very important to do it because it will loosen your attachment to the ego idea. When you have a softer or weaker attachment to the ego idea, you can have a stronger relationship and connection with Source or the God mind. Now, the human form is basically what entraps the ego in this dimension and spins the wheel of karma. As you continue to work with your ego, what you'll find is you'll start to resolve various attachments and energy cords to various karmas, and the strengths of your ego will dissolve and a higher reality will start to make itself known. If you can do some deep self-inquiry meditation, you're going to find that you, as a human being, are nothing other than a bunch of ideas. So once you realize that you're a bunch of ideas, you're going to realize also that the human condition is only that. There's nothing more substantial to the human condition apart from a set of apparently outer conditions that contain this bunch of ideas, which is your ego and your experience of a human life. Now, the paradox in this matter is that when you transcend your ego, when you understand you're nothing more than an idea and you perceive the reality beyond the human condition, you'll find that you're still actually in the human condition and your earthly life continues. The illusion itself doesn't disappear and you continue to exist in this reality. So, one of the paradoxes of philosophy is to ponder upon why that is and why the I idea keeps rethinking itself, because it's that rethinking of the I idea that keeps you in this dimension. And taking it further, it's the continuance of that I idea, the notion of an ego that spins a wheel of death and rebirth for many, many lifetimes. And if you don't cut this attachment to the I idea, it's impossible to break free of the human form. I can say and share a lot of my spiritual practice and silence over a few years, contemplating the matter of the human form and the I idea. I found that in my awareness I could separate from the I idea and witness it with detachment, noticing it continue to exist yet having detached my attachment to it, because I understood that on a higher level this idea of me is only a thought and isn't ultimately real. I came to understand that my life here is a very complex dream existing alongside many other complex dreams that are other human beings. And all of these complex dreams that are the manifestations of human beings are being dreamt up by a higher reality that one might know as Source or the God Mind. Now, if you want to dissolve your attachment to the human condition and start to resolve some of the karmas that would otherwise keep you bound to the wheel, it's very important to trace the thoughts back. In your practice, you can ask yourself, who is having this idea of me? Who thought up the I idea, and where is it coming from? Sometimes you have to spend a lot of time in silence and deeper contemplation to get some answers. But when you make a breakthrough, you're going to start to witness yourself, your life, your ego, your I, everything that is you. You're going to witness it from another perspective, and that other perspective is the higher reality, is the transcendental, it's the source consciousness, the root in the higher grounding. And from that other perspective, you can look at your life from a space of additional perspective or dimensionality, and then you're going to understand this human form and your whole life is nothing but a series of ideas happening in a much greater consciousness which surrounds the human condition and expands far beyond it. And what some people find when they go into these states of consciousness, that in the transcendent realities beyond the I idea, or in other words, the astral planes, you're going to find other higher sentient beings, star beings, ETs, angelic beings. They too are also ideas of the higher mind, the source mind, the God mind, but they're more refined ideas, and because they're refined in their awareness, they no longer have the human form, and instead they have the angelic, ascended, or immortal form. And those three attributes can sometimes exist in conjunction in the energy signature of one of these higher beings. Now, the deeper thing that we have to reflect upon once we become aware of these star beings is, how can we become like them? How is it in this universe that there's other sentient beings with intelligence that don't have the human form? How is it they're up there in a higher plane, and how did they actually get there? Then you have to ask yourself why, when those higher beings are up there, why you as a human being are down here, and what the point of differentiation is. What is it that you have that they don't have, which determines the fact that you remain here on earth in a body enchained to your I idea? Because when you journey into the astral and you have a lot of visionary experiences, you'll notice all of these other planes populated by very many sentient beings, and when you start to experience them, then this question arises, how can I also become one of them? How can I transcend the I idea and the reincarnational wheel of karma that exists for me, so I can start to exist or reincarnate in these higher worlds as star beings, free from the karma of decay, sickness, suffering, death, and duality, in other words, separation from the ultimate truth of Source as the principal reality. This plane here on Earth, it's duality. No matter how much insight you have, no matter how much understanding you have in the physical body, no matter how much philosophy you do, no matter how many mystical experiences that you have, you're always, whilst you're here, in a dualistic reality that is to some extent separated from the transcendental. So you have to ask yourself why that is. And I can tell you the truth is it's the very deep attachment to the idea of I, this idea of I, that you have an ego, is fictitious to some extent. It's an illusion, yet it appears real whilst you're here in this reality. There's some aspect of your awareness that keeps dreaming you up here again and again, and the master lesson is to identify and realize in your consciousness that you here are nothing other than an I idea having a dream in the physical reality. If you have enough insight into that, you will transcend the illusion of the ego being a ultimately real reality, and it will loosen its grasp upon you, and you will start to enter into the karma-free regions of higher consciousness, where the ego does not exist. There is no karma whatsoever. There's only awareness. There's only higher dimensional reality. It's very pure and strong. It's loving. It's powerful, and it's very immortal. There's no death and sickness and suffering there. But it's a higher reality that exists outside of your ego. So it's the ego that's the only prison, and many teachers will tell you the same, that the ego is what's entrapping the higher dimensional body here on Earth. So you have to unpack this and reflect upon the stories, the themes, the karmas, and the principles running in your life to come to a deeper understanding as to A, what you're doing here, and B, once you realize what you're doing here, how to complete and learn your lessons here on this earth in a body, so that you don't have to reincarnate. It's the unresolved lessons connected with the human form that make human beings reincarnate here again and again, and the failure to grasp the deeper truth of reality kind of slows everything down and creates a density in vibration that then perpetuates for many lifetimes through the karmic wheel until you can snap out of it. And the hook, the ultimate hook that's driving your participation in the karmic wheel is your ego. It's the human form is the experience of you in a body and everything that is your life, but at the core of that is something called your ego, and it's an idea that's fictitious. It's a self-identity that's kind of self-fabricated itself out of nothing and then projected this experience of a human life to have all kinds of complex experiences. In other words, it's a very complex dream, and some aspect of your being is having a dream. And once you start to get into a deeper understanding about what is dreaming your existence here, you can start to break through into a higher understanding, reflect upon that, ground in that higher reality, and then you have the chance to ascend out of the endless karmas of rebirth and death. You know, many people are born and they die again, many times, and they got no idea what is going on, because when the I idea reincarnates into this world, it's so all-consuming that very quickly the awareness is lost of the higher truth, and then as a result one gets snagged into a density, and then one can re-perpetuate karmic patterns again and again, life after life without end, until one has the good fortune, the opportunity, and the determination to break out of the conditioning of the ego and get grounded into a higher reality. Now, when I talk about the human form, what I mean is everything that makes up the human life in this dimension. When you get advanced on the spiritual path, you'll find 90% of the human life becomes meaningless because it's associated with activities, energies, or people, or occupations that have nothing to do with you. They're not useful for you, and they're not conducive to your evolution. It's because you've outgrown them and they no longer serve your evolution. And when you work all that through, you'll find a lot of your life kind of like leaves you. A lot of various people, events, situations, everything kind of like leaves your life, leaving you with very little left. So basically, that's like a big cleansing, it's a big releasing, it's a big cutting from the karmic human condition, and also it's the release of 90% or thereabouts of your human form. Now, the reason why 100% of the human form doesn't go in one hit is because you need a small amount of the human form in order to discern the higher reality from the perspective of the human body. You don't need 100% of the human form to access the higher realities, because it's connected into all kinds of other human energies that will pull you the other way. So generally what happens on the path is 90% of your humanity disappears. You have about 10% left, and then 90%, that 90% of the human form that you lost is kind of filled up by another form, and whatever you call that depends on how you perceive the higher reality. You know, some people might view it as God or ET intelligence or the presence of source, but whatever you call it, that other reality will then come in and consume almost all of your human form. And that's what I sense is one of the last stages on the path, the mass ejection of a big chunk of the human form, because it's no longer serving your path, and you've learned so many lessons in the earthly plane that all of the cords that your ego has to all of that are totally dissolved, and thus a big chunk of what you could call earthly karma or earthly learning is ticked off. When you get that big tick, then you can't ever be an ordinary human ever again. Life can never ever be the same, even if you try and go back into that ordinary human life. It won't work for you. It will become meaningless, and ultimately it will spit you back out into the spiritual path and force you to find some deeper answers. So it's very important to realize, if you're really determined on this path, you're going to experience a point of no return where it's no longer possible to be an ordinary human being ever again. Each person on the advanced path is going to have to go through a very strong series of initiations, lessons, which represent the culmination of earthly karma. And when that happens and you go through those lessons and learnings, whatever they are for you, then what happens is there's a massive removal from your energy of earth karma, earth density, human form, anchor to the reincarnational wheel, or whatever label you want to use for it. In essence, you can simply say a big chunk of your karma and your human nature is gone, and then you're tethered by a thread to the very edge of the reincarnational wheel, which is spinning round with billions and billions of human beings inside it, and you're on the very edge, just tethered by a thread, because you only have a few percent left of your human form. Now, I'm still in that process myself. I haven't totally shed my human form, otherwise I wouldn't be here. And I perceive a big chunk of it has gone, and I can testify from experience, when you lose a big chunk of your human form, it happens suddenly after a lot of work that goes on for years and years. One day, the descent of grace or the power of God or source will come down from above, come in your being, and then bang, it will push out in one big hit a massive chunk of karmic crust, and then you're going to see reality from a very different perspective. You'll still be incarnated in a human being, but you understand the illusion and the transience of the human condition. You're going to see the human condition for what it is, a sphere of learning, a dream reality, a transient and impermanent one, and it's just a sphere that you're moving through on your way to a higher reality. Once you shared like this 90% of your human form or thereabouts, you will be able to perceive the other reality and next stage on your spiritual journey, because these big karmic crusts I talk about that suddenly get blown off by the power of grace, they are heavy, chunky rails that block you from existing in a higher dimension. In my understanding and through the writings in my various books, the ultimate idea is to transcend the human form entirely. And I believe the way you do that is you're predominantly anchored into a higher dimensional astral reality, and you bring that down into the body, and you exist in that reality, that other reality. And the more you do that, the more you're going to like gravitate out of ordinary human life into more monastic conditions. And then you have to use the remainder of your life to reflect upon everything, to reflect upon these other realities, to reflect on the themes of your life, of your karma, of your learnings, of your lessons, and at the same time to enter into a very deep relationship with this higher presence. When that higher presence or power comes in and blows off a chunk of your earthly karma and pretty much ends your journey through the reincarnational cycle, it's in your interest to understand what that power is. What is this energy that comes in and cuts your karma to the human worlds? What is the intelligence behind it? Where does it come from? What's my connection with it? And how can I enter into a deeper relationship with it? These are all very complex reflections, contemplations, and meditations. But on the other hand, once 90% of your human form has been blasted off by this powerful descent of grace, the chances are you're going to have the conditions in your life and the space in your awareness to ponder the deeper questions and to inquire as to what it is that's actually come in, descended into your human form, and blown off a chunk of your karma. And when you contemplate that sufficiently, you're going to realize it's a benevolence, it's grace, it's a descent of a very favorable energy, and ultimately you could call that energy love, because an energy and the universe has somehow found you, recognized everything you've gone through on the path, and then pretty much without warning, at the culmination of your learning, it's kind of blasted down and purified a huge chunk of your earthly karma. So you're going to see it as a very benevolent grace or a love. And once you experience this power as a grace or a love, it's going to open you up very profoundly here. You'll perceive that energy here as a non-human form of love, what I talk about on my website as source love, or love from star beings, love from ETs. It's going to come and it's going to rest here, and you'll know when that's happened because you'll always feel like a higher dimensional angelic presence in the heart chakra, a higher love from above, from God, from star beings, from the higher powers has come down and seeded itself inside your earthly heart and given you, it's kind of given you the seed of higher love, which then sprouts in your energy body. And then, in my experience, what you start to feel is this overwhelming presence and awareness of a higher dimensional love. It's love that lightens up your body, It helps you to be able to fast a lot more and leave the food away. It gives you a lot of strength, power, vitality. It gives you will and determination. It also helps you to do a lot of emotional work. If you've got a few things to finish off, it's going to help you to do love and forgiveness, releasing. And it's also going to enable you to integrate the lessons of compassion for humanity when you leave the human form behind and you're witnessing the bulk of humanity from the periphery going through its dramas, its stories, its struggles and sufferings. If you don't develop compassion here, it's going to be almost unbearable to witness in the end. So ultimately, you're going to have that grace and that higher love in order for you to do that. And sooner or later, your ego or your denser human form is going to have to crack to allow that in so you can progress on the spiritual path and get this huge energy boost and be rammed outside of the denser regions of the karmic wheel. So I'll leave it there for this discourse. In the next discourse, I'm going to talk more about source love and the benevolent nature of that love and how we can use that love in our spiritual lives to advance ourselves on the spiritual path and remain grounded in the earthly conditions whilst remaining connected to our star beings. So I'll leave it there for this discourse, and I'll be speaking to you again soon in discourse 5 about the topic of love. Okay, so that's all for now. Free spirit out.